Awesome. Hey guys, today we're going to talk about cars. This is going to be a little bit different than the Tesla ones. This actually came up while I was doing the Tesla videos and looking more into the car's interior and kind of getting a feel of where I think these things are going and where I'd like them to go. You get a sense when you look at all these modern cars, I guess in one way I see Tesla leading the pack with the Model 3 and the Model Y, crazy minimalist interiors. We're seeing that kind of trend as we get more electric cars and modern cars. They're all kind of following this idea of putting on bigger and bigger touchscreens, getting rid of buttons and dials and levers and all these different things that we used to have plastered all over the dashboard of the car. We're seeing them hide all that into screens. And we're getting really cool things. We're getting cool animations, we're getting cool 3 kind of like models in the cars showing us a lot of information. But it kind of led me to look at all the old cars and go, what about them? You know, everybody with an old car is like stuck with, normal buttons and things like that. And all these new cars are getting these like really cool new toys. And I was like thinking about this a lot, and I realized that we actually have a very unique chance of taking advantage of old car dashboards. Now, for me, a very big thing, and I've talked about this quite a few times, is when you go with flat glass panels, flat glass windows that you are using to interact with the digital world, you lose a lot of the old feelings you get. You lose haptics, you lose material, you lose the textures. You lose all these different really cool things that the real world gives us, right? When we go around the world, when we touch things, when we interact with real world objects, we've got so much information that's coming into our senses that we don't realize, right? Temperature, texture, material, all those different things are helping us gauge and interact and interface with the real world. We lose most of that when we go into the touchscreen. Now, there have been different I've seen different research onto kind of trying to bring some of these back. I've seen things that are trying to like squeeze liquid into different panels. So even though in one hand it could be glass, when you could do certain things and raise different edges and areas of the glass, so you can kind of like bring buttons back and all that feedback. So far I haven't seen it really come into commercial products, but like that's exactly what we can take advantage of in cars. So let's utilize what the car has, the unique interior that they've been built with, all the different buttons and dials and gauges that cars already have, that have raised surfaces. A huge pro that old cars have that we're kind of losing is this idea of controlling the car without having to remove our eyes from the road, right? That's a very big danger that some of these systems, like Tesla, is kind of like bringing. There's a lot of things that are like being hidden behind menus and maybe 1, 2, 3 button presses. The glove box is one example. We're usually used to kind of latch. You don't even have to look over. You can kind of reach over and open the glove box while driving. We're not going to get into why you're doing that, but like just the concept of that, turning up and down the volume. The idea is when you have these raised areas, when buttons come out, when they have texture, when they have kind of like volume, when they're there and you can feel them, maybe you have to look at them for an instant to be able to like kind of get them in the general area. But like once you kind of like look at the volume and like you reach out, once you're touching that dial, once you've actually like I guess situated your hand, you don't need to look at how to raise and lower the volume, right? You could do that without looking. Similar things with buttons. I mean, yes, when buttons get like long rows of buttons, and you kind of like have a toggle of them, yeah, even though they're raised, the fact that there's a bunch of them next to each other, they're not really raised until they're each other, you lose that. I mean, older cars, you kind of had like a D press, where really when a button was pressed and all the other ones would like pop out, you could really, feel what's happening, but like a lot of the newer ones, these buttons like don't really click in and out, and so you do lose a bit of that feeling. But okay, let's just look into jumping and how we could improve those things. So things like dial buttons, or let's say dials, right? Sometimes they contain buttons inside of them. But we use them for things like controlling air conditioner, controlling volume, they're used a lot for these kind of things. Imagine if with augmented reality you could bring out a UI, you can bring out a volume, a dial UI that maybe is like clicking around it, that's showing us the volume as it's going. So the UI is directly on top of it. So we can glance the button and see the control, or we don't have to because we hear it going up and down, but there are certain things that we can't. So volume, you might be able to hear the volume going up and down. So you don't need that feedback necessarily, but it's nice to have. But there's other things that you don't necessarily see, like temperature. You don't immediately see the results, so sometimes you want to see that information. What a lot of these old cars, but we're talking about also the 2000s, you were getting slowly these small radio screens, and then later on the bigger GPS screens have come along, and then obviously now we've got 15, 17-inch screens, and sometimes, I think the Mazda latest concepts even bigger than that. But a lot of how these old cars worked is you didn't actually have that UI, the button state or the volume control UI. You didn't have that on the actual button, you had that on another screen. So there was you'd have to look at something else to see the status of what that button or that dial is up to. So here we can bring that back. We can bring, so volume controls. Imagine buttons. Imagine if like that button could fill up, right? So if you do have a state, we could see a really beautiful animation which looks like it's part of the button. But we can see that button maybe from a diving state. We can see the opacity gets raised and lower. So that button looks like it's filled or not filled. We can see like a little button filling up. We could use different UI elements on top of the button, so taking advantage of the taptic feedback, taking advantage of, we can feel each turn of the dial, so that's great. We don't have to look at it, but let's bring the UI onto it, not onto a separate screen. So you have buttons, you have different things. You can, all the new cars hide things in menus, right? A couple layers deep, because that's how you have when you have a limited flat screen. But here we've got dials that exist in 3D space around us, so let's take advantage of that without having everything kind of like virtually stacked behind each other, which is what menus pretty much are. We've actually got the 3D space of the car interior. Let's take advantage of that and use that to show. So tab buttons, let's make it more obvious. Maybe we can make the icon a bit bigger, hover above it, glow, fill in that specific button. We're using the UI, we're stacking it on top of it to make it better. We can bring 3D effects, right? We can stack 2D and a lot of 2D effects, especially if you watch like Iron Man or these like kind of fantastical Hollywood movies that bring these kind of futuristic user interfaces in them. A lot of them don't actually just give you a bunch of 3D objects, they actually stack 2D layers on top of each other and give you like a really cool effect. So we can bring 3D layers, the 3D feeling. It could track our eyes and it can move around, but that layer can also help us, right? And could look really, really cool. We have retro gauges, right? Using animations to really bring those things to life and help explain us. You have retro levers, do some really cool things over there. Tab buttons, like I said before, the state, it doesn't really do much besides lighting up maybe the letters or numbers or whatever it is at night. Or you might have like a little state light, but beyond that, there's not much more that you know about what the state is other than the radio screen, so you can do a lot with that. The aircon vents, this is something I love in Tesla. They show like the flow on the screen, and like I've said in other videos, what I would love to see is like a virtual flow. With augmented reality, that could be really cool. So coming out of the vents, you can see the virtual flow of exactly where it's being positioned, maybe even control it. But just seeing that virtual flow is pretty cool. And as you move the real vent, you can see that flow and where exactly it's on. A lot of the time when I'm trying to get the flow, I'm like putting my hand up to feel like where the actual flow is. Seeing that virtual flow would be really cool. We're going to finish off with the last thing. Tesla, a lot of modern ones have like a 3D kind of like car on the gauge in front of you. With augmented reality, we could actually make that 3D car a 3D model, right? Maybe sitting on that like center armrest kind of thing next to you. You could see like the doors open, things like that. Bring those things out instead of being flat 3D models, on a flat screen. We could actually have that like a hologram. And this is a crazy idea, so I don't advocate it, but imagine if you could actually control your car like a toy car. So you have your like 3D model of the car next to you that's showing you all the gauges, and like a 3D scene of the road and the lanes and everything next to it, trees growing up and everything. Imagine moving that, you could actually control the direction of the car. Anyways, that's it for now. Shabbat Shalom, and I will see you guys in the future.